Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Hope you all had a good week. Finishing off strong here today. Why? Because we have perhaps one of the biggest CEOs in the cannabis space, Zach George from SNDL, which trades on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol SNDL. He'll be joining us. Welcome back to the podcast. It's been about a year since he's been on, but I know a lot of you have reached out from time to time. We've done our due diligence, and we've got him on to talk about some of the latest numbers. Over $920 million reported in 2024. Job well done. We're seeing growth. Yes, growth with certain cannabis companies, and they're one of them. Plus, we'll get into specifics, including the 5.4% stake in HITI. What was the rationale behind all that, and what this could potentially mean on the two companies aligning? We'll get into that sort of stuff and answer some of the questions that you guys have had. Plus, Marvin Washington is going to be joining us after that. Former Super Bowl winner and a big cannabis advocate. As I said yesterday, we met him in Washington this week. He's doing a lot of incredible stuff, not only on behalf of sports leagues and cannabis, but really advocating in Washington, something that we need to see more of when it comes to certain sports celebrities with their profile, with the attention that they attract, having a voice in Washington and educating them on, and why he thinks we could see some interesting stuff in the cannabis space when it comes to reform as soon as next month. So we'll get into that a little bit later. Let's welcome in AV here on a Friday morning. Good to see you. How are things?
How's it going? Good. I'm actually looking quite forward to jumping into this. I know Zach's quite a shrewd capital allocator. We've got the high tide headlines, and I did enjoy his annual letter on the state of the industry that had a lot of good meat to it. So I'm really looking forward to jumping into this conversation.
Well, let's dissect that meat, and let's welcome in perhaps one of the smartest CEOs in the space, Mr. Zach George from SNDL. Good to see you, sir. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much. Good morning. Great to be with you guys today.
Looks like a nice little setting you got in the background there. That is in, where are you right now?
Today I'm in Connecticut, and spring is almost here.
Yes. We were in Washington earlier this week, and it felt like spring was there. But being a little bit further north, it looked like the weather was a little bit like what we get in a month from now. But yes, spring is here. New opportunities. Let's quick, before we look ahead, look at some of the numbers that you reported last year and your last quarter. $257.7 million for the fourth quarter, along with $920.4 million for the year, representing a 3.7% growth. Based off of that, Zach, how would you best describe the year that was had? And as a CEO, do you feel like you accomplished what you wanted to basically set out for the overall year when looking back at it now?
I appreciate the question, Chad. So look, we don't spend a lot of time celebrating, but I would say that the team smashed quite a few records in 2024. Really meeting our stated goal, publicly stated goal of reaching unadjusted free cash flow generation for the full calendar year.
Yep.
Was a big milestone for the company. We have a lot more gas in the tank and working on a lot of organic improvement that we're excited to share with investors going forward.
Yeah. We're seeing a lot of companies in the space struggle to maintain profitability. So how would you best describe, I guess, the current state of the industry, and where does that, I guess, position yourself as you continue to see growth?
Well, state of the industry is definitely a challenge.
Yeah.
You need to be an optimist and have a high pain tolerance to, be an operator in this industry.
Just a tad.
The macros here, I think it's a fact that more THC is being consumed around the planet on a daily basis. But of course, underneath that surface, there's a lot of dysfunction and a real lack of competitiveness and profitability. And that's changing slowly. But I think we're just really in the midst of the reckoning right now that's going to transform the landscape and determine who the real winners are.
Wow. Bold.
So you just mentioned a very important word, unadjusted free cash flow. In your annual letter, you had mentioned that regarding the MSOs and regarding some of the companies in the States, it's kind of just superfluous to even look at EBITDA metrics, as they're not paying cash or they're not paying taxes, and a lot of these numbers are adjusted. When do you think that this industry starts to turn and look at unadjusted numbers as it relates to reporting and start to clear up these financial metrics that we're using as metrics of valuation for the industry on a lot of the U.S. assets?
It's a great question. I think it's starting, but it's still only visible in pockets. I would say, analytical minds such as yours are focused on the metrics that matter and can see through the smoke. But those adjustments, there's levels to it, right? There's adjustments that are bringing gross margins to higher levels on an inappropriate basis with backing out impairments for biomass that were cash investments in prior periods. There's the use of EBITDA, which obviously excludes taxes, which in the U.S. is a very punitive dynamic with 280E for the most part. So you really have to look at models that are going to lean more towards a focus on gross margin, operating income, net income, and free cash flow. And I think we're moving in that direction.
And I know we're going to get into the Canadian business, which is stable to say the least right now. And I know you have your sights set on some growth, I guess, and growth drivers for the Canadian business. But Sunstream, it's been a big part of the story since you started to deploy cash into the United States. I know you have the assets in the Parallel business, SkyMint as well in Michigan, and then you have a couple other facilities spread out on several U.S. operators. How are you looking at the U.S. right now in terms of, we're seeing stagnant growth metrics across the board from a lot of the MSOs that are reporting. There's a lot of opacity and uncertainty around reform, and we're still bogged down with 280E. Has your thesis changed going into 2025 and beyond as far as looking and conducting business in the future in the U.S.?
It hasn't really changed, but certainly the fact pattern in real time on the ground has. So we've been calling for this reckoning for the last 3+ years. We experienced a very fulsome and very deep cycle of price compression, margin erosion in Canada. And perversely, I think that puts us and some of our peers in Canada in a very interesting position as we're watching some of these cycles take hold in states that have been just absolute fortresses when it comes to pricing and margin for so long. So I've been calling for it, but I think, again, you got to separate wheat from chaff. I've read some characterizations of Florida that are quite negative, but again, it's one thing to see price compression, and yes, while everyone was chilling champagne, getting ready for A3, quietly prices were down over 20% year over year at the time. But unit volume is still growing. So we were always expecting this price compression, and it's really a question of which models are going to continue to flourish and be highly competitive to survive and generate positive economics in a very different pricing environment, which we think is ultimately coming for everyone.
Well, beginning of the reckoning, so you see there's going to be some big opportunities with some of these distressed assets in the U.S. over the next 12 to 18 months is what you're thinking?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Like those two words. So based off that, what really, in your views, when it comes to making an asset or a partnership particularly attractive, what do you look for? Is there certain markets, like you just mentioned, Florida? Is there anything in particular that has piqued your interest that you're looking at right now without actually naming names?
There's more opportunity out there for us, especially with our balance sheet positioning, than we can or should look at. Our priorities are very clear. We are focused on becoming and building a dominant position in Canada. That requires continued focus on building out our retail network. We have these two restructurings, which have been long and tortured processes that I wouldn't really wish upon my worst enemy in the cases of SkyMint and Parallel. We believe that there are some final court dates that are coming up within the next month that will lay a clear path to closing those restructurings. And there's tremendous opportunity and a lot of low-hanging fruit with both of those businesses. And so you'll see us focus a lot of attention there. And then there's also quite a bit of excitement around, it's a small base, but this international call for Canadian flower and products is an emerging dynamic that's actually changing the landscape in Canada in terms of the domestic market as biomass has been redirected to non-excise burdened transactions internationally.
Yeah, I have heard that, and we have learned that actually the last couple of weeks speaking to Margaret over at Rubicon Organics, but she was outlining to us that actually there's a shortage in Canada because of the amount of tension that's gone on in the international market in the domestic market of Canada. But how would you, I guess, have you had any, and I know we bring this up, excise tax, I don't think there's been really any movement. There's a lot more priorities right now, knowing that there's going to be a federal election in Canada within the next month. But do you foresee anything changed in the near-term future with excise tax in Canada and really what the Canadian market presents to you that maybe a lot of investors are unaware of? Because perception has always been, let's not focus on Canada over the last 3 or 4 years, but I think we're starting to see definitely a different script that's being created right now.
So I would say that we're in the camp that we're not expecting excise reform in the near term. There are other opportunities where we can gain efficiencies as an industry, both in upstream and downstream business models, where we're not actually standing with our hand out asking for capital back from the government. And I think, as you mentioned, with the state of play in terms of the Canadian election, the lack of competitiveness, and other concerns around tariffs, excise tax and the cash cow that is cannabis is pretty far down the list in terms of reform. So I think that's going to be difficult. It will come at some point. I mean, you're effectively generating on the same revenue 4 to 5 times the excise rate you would see in liquor. So at some point that will likely be addressed, but I wouldn't expect it in the near term at all. And we actually feel the same way about the U.S. marketplace. So the fact that every bid that has entered this sector, the indices, the individual names over the last 4 years has come on the back of a hype around regulatory reform is something that is a very painful and almost annoying dynamic where we have a really hard time getting investors to focus on the fundamentals.
Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned that some Canadian LPs are starting to focus on the EU. With your Canadian business right now, the way that you fortified it, and we just talked about the United States with the exposure via the Sunstream asset, are you evaluating and looking at the EU, or was the US your natural second step in terms of growth and focus for the business?
That's well put. So yes, the U.S. was the second step, but it's a fascinating market that's emerged. The POs that we're seeing are quite sustained and sizable in terms of demand from Europe. And you've got a situation where the combination of the manner in which the industry was born in the early bubble before the turn of the decade drove a lot of construction, development of infrastructure, particularly cultivation. So you have a very large footprint in Canada. The cultivation environment is much different than what you would see in the US, which is more akin to a typical agricultural operation. We are processing and cultivating, in many cases, in quasi-pharma grade environments. And so when you combine that overbuilding and then the success and sort of cannabis IQ that's been developed by these operators, both in terms of SOPs as well as genetic management, and then layer on top of that the weakness in the Canadian dollar. The fact of the matter is, unexpectedly, Canadian flower is highly competitive, even in some cases indoor, because of the leverage to hydropower in provinces like BC, Quebec, and parts of Ontario. So a really interesting dynamic that I think 5 years ago wouldn't have been predictable. And then what you're seeing is sort of the tub getting drained, so to speak. There's been so much talk about the oversupply in Canada. That is changing and changing very quickly.
That's what I hear. Yeah. Another notable number that was outlined in your latest earnings was that you acquired a 5.4% stake in perhaps your biggest cannabis competitor, which is HITI, which is really grabbed a lot of people's attention. So one, what was the rationale behind this? And based off of this move, what's this say about your view of HITI as a company, knowing that you have an investment interest in them?
I appreciate the question, and apologies for not delivering fireworks for you guys today. But look, I think your legal analysis when that news dropped was accurate. You identified the fact that we filed a 13G indicating a passive investment. So I would offer the following. We have respect for Raj and the team at HITI. We understand the retail landscape in Canada extremely well. It's important to note that HITI has been both a strong commercial partner and competitor to us over time. So this is a reasonably small investment. Again, we have a debt-free balance sheet with over $200 million of unrestricted cash. And we tend to gravitate towards strategies and management teams that understand the importance of free cash flow generation and cost discipline. And the HITI team has demonstrated that. So beyond that, there's not a lot to say right now. And if that were to change or our intent would change in any way, we're professionals. We would be calling Raj first. And so probably best if we leave it there for now.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. So investors can take it how they want.
Yeah, I think that was a solid response.
Yeah.
In terms of the Canadian market, you have a lot of valuable insights within your enterprise onto how the Canadian consumer is consuming cannabis and trends. In the US right now, we're starting to see the consumer tighten their belts. Spending is less. You're starting to see it in retail. Are you seeing any trends within the Canadian consumer as per them shifting from a premium to, let's say, a value product? Are you seeing any sort of metrics, I don't want to say deteriorate, but lessen in terms of, let's say, basket size or volume and frequency? Or is the Canadian consumer intact in terms of their spending power right now from at least what you're seeing?
No, everything you said was spot on, Anthony. I think I came on a year ago and talked about the two dominant themes with the Canadian consumer really being convenience and value. And that hasn't changed in any way. Your reference to basket size, in terms of the data we see, we've seen an increased frequency of visits and smaller basket size, as I think some of that consumer confidence is fragile at the margin. Pricing is still really important. In terms of what's also been interesting is watching the shift in these categories against the backdrop of a $5 billion plus Canadian market. And so the latest phase of this, you are seeing prices on even value, flour, and all manner of biomass inputs increase materially. And so we went into this cycle coming out of the trough with pre-roll and vape really taking dominant positions because of the convenience of those form factors. They're almost half the market. And as you see dried flower increase in price and become slightly less accessible, I think it's just going to accelerate the growth in those categories as part of the total mix.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you'd mentioned that you're debt-free, $200 million in cash on the balance sheet. Right now, hemp is a huge hot topic in the States. Unlike all of your peers, pretty much with the exception of Tilray, you have valuable insights into the distribution and the mechanics of how the alcohol business actually works. Have you contemplated looking at Delta 9 beverages in the United States, or from a ground up perspective, or even a strategic investment perspective via the Sunstream vehicle?
We're constantly evaluating opportunities. We have not yet committed material capital in that direction, and want to make sure we're staying disciplined. We have our work cut out for us. We have a lot on our plate right now, a lot of opportunity right directly in front of us to execute on. So that's really the focus. We want to make sure that we don't confuse activity with progress. Okay. So we're watching the situation very, very carefully. It's obviously impacting markets, and you'll hear very differing views on even the impact that these hemp-derived products are having on pricing in cannabis.
Yes.
But we have not taken steps in that direction, nor participated in a lot of the vitriol you'll see between the sort of cannabis and hemp camps online.
Yeah. One of our most popular viewers, Jordan Wyatt, good to see him. SNDL through Good Blend also has one of the only medical licenses in Texas. Big market, and a lot of news coming out of that state over the past week pertaining to a lot of the illegal, what was there, 8,000 locations for dispensary locations, Anthony? That's have you paid much attention to that, what's going on in Texas, Zach?
I was just in Texas a few weeks ago and have spent quite a bit of time there. We think there's an enormous opportunity in the medical market. I'm a Houston native originally, so Texas is always close to my heart. And yeah, it's a very interesting dichotomy in the state, somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 hemp retail locations. I kind of try to simplify this as much as possible in public comments, in the sense that this really comes down to age gating at the end of the day. You either believe that intoxicating products should be accessible to children or not. I don't think it's controversial. Apparently it is with some. But in many respects, the genie is out of the bottle. And so perversely, we're sort of sitting here asking this question of, can hemp actually save cannabis in terms of driving rational reform that applies to all cannabinoids, when at the base level, we're dealing with the same plant here.
Yep. Last question I'm going to ask you. You have a lot of moving parts, but attractive moving parts within your business model. Someone sits down with you and says, where do you envision this company 3 years from now? What do you say?
I believe we're on a clear path to be a top 3 global leader in the space, and if not, likely acquired by one. But we're really clear on the mission that we have, the opportunity set in front of us, our capital priorities.
Okay.
And I couldn't be more pleased with the progress that my growing team has made over the last 2 years.
It's great. All business, Mr. Zach George. Always good to catch up with you. I hope you're not a Cowboys fan, being from Houston, right?
No, fortunately not.
Good to see you. I can understand why people have a lot of respect and like the vision that you're creating, because there's a clear path to revenue and what you envision the next couple of years. But on the alcohol level, the Canadian level, the U.S. opportunity presents, and even the international level, you got a heck of a story that you're building out here, and a lot of cash to go with it. So with that, appreciate you checking in on behalf of Anthony and I and our viewers, and let's keep in touch. Okay, Zach?
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate the time. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Talk soon, Zach.
Appreciate it. Phenomenal vision that he has, all business, and you can understand why a lot of people always are reaching out to us to get him on. But yeah, he's incredible the way he explains things, and time is money, and he doesn't waste a lot of time. But what was your big takeaway?
Calm, cool, and collected.
Calm, cool, and collected. That's for sure. Well, as we said yesterday, we were in Washington actually this week, met a lot of great people, including our next guest, who's a former Super Bowl winner and now an advisor with Leafwell. Let's welcome in Mr. Marvin Washington. Good to see you, sir. Welcome to the podcast for the first time. How are you? I think you're on mute, my friend. You might be on mute. All good. All good.
No, it's all good. Hey, good to see you guys. Last time we saw each other, we were in the basement or the underground of the Capitol. So it's good to be above ground.
It's like a whole other world, isn't it? I felt like I was in the movie like The Dark Knight. It's just like you're in Gotham City and you have all these tunnels underneath. It's a whole other world, but the transportation getting to and from, it was actually pretty cool to experience.
Yeah, it is. That's my third time being on the Capitol, and the second time being underneath and seeing the little tram system they have underneath there to get the senators and congressmen around. So it was a good week. You know, the summit was a good week and meeting a lot of good people. And I look forward to going back as soon as next month.
Yeah, it's great. Well, listen, I wanted to have you on because I thought it was important for our viewers just to kind of like understand who you are and what your role is. But we attended actually one of the panel events. You were on with the former head of HHS secretary, Kathleen. What's her last name again? I brought this up yesterday. So, and I thought it was a fascinating discussion. The two of you were speaking in front of 250 people, but you have some real beliefs that we could start to see some sort of cannabis reform at some point this year that I thought was interesting. But before we get into that, you know, I know you played in the NFL. You won a Super Bowl at the Denver Broncos. You have obviously a name that's going to attract people, being a former sports athlete. And what I really liked is the fact that you're in Washington advocating. I think we need to see more of that from more athletes pertaining to all the sports, whether they're playing or retired. But first off, you work with Leafwell. You want to describe what your role is and what your main objective is with them and what you're trying to advocate for?
Well, with Leafwell, I feel I'm working in the future of cannabis as far as medical cannabis, because they're bringing together doctors, patients, and insurance. And this is something that we thought about in cannabis, 10 years ago, because everything in cannabis and the use of it, medicinal use of it, has been anecdotally, but Leafwell is using data science and research to make sure that it's fact. And we have 100 doctors and with specializing in 30 indications. So if you have like arthritis, like a lot of NFL guys have, we have a rheumatologist that can, get you the right strain, right terpenes, right flavonoid, so you don't have to take the opiates and benzodiazepines. Leafwell brought me on, number one, to bring this to the sports leagues. And I'm getting great reception with the NBA alumni. I'm getting great reception with the MLB and great reception with the NHL. And I will be approaching the NFL as soon as tomorrow. But this is something, like I said, this is something that we've medicated with for thousands of years, and we need to get back to it. And I think Leafwell is showing how it can be done, how cannabis can replace or reduce the use of opiates, because they have it in the research and data.
Why is the NFL stalling at this so much? I don't get it. Like if at any sport and you deal with arthritis and pain as someone, how many years did you play in the NFL?
I played 11 years in the NFL, had 11 different surgeries. And the thing is that I don't see how you can play in the NFL without opiates and benzodiazepines. But I think the NFL should offer an alternative.
Okay.
And particularly when you come with your anti-inflammatories and guys dealing with anxiety and restlessness and all those things that come with the pressure of playing in NFL, I think the alternative should be a natural, non-toxic, non-addictive alternative. And I think cannabis should lead the way.
Yeah.
From when you played and up to when you retired, we've seen a lot of reform as it relates to the cannabis industry. I mean, you retired in 2000, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
So over the past 25 years, we've seen an immense movement in the United States. Do you believe that cannabis is more prevalent today within the leagues as it's used from a medicinal perspective and a therapeutic, or was it just as prevalent back then? It was just more concealed and players weren't just as open with it as far as
I think the use has not changed. I think the use of it medicinally has definitely changed because this generation here is more informed than we were. I can say we played back in the dark ages and everything, but now the information is at the tip of your fingers, and these guys come up to me and they're more educated or just as educated as I am on cannabis and hemp, particularly with the hemp products and the topicals and what they can do as far as muscle soreness, what they can do as far as recovery. So I think that's the wave of the future, man, is plant-based medicine.
Have you had any conversations with anyone? Of course you have, but have you had any communications with any of the members of the new Trump administration about any of this stuff? And what's been some of their feedback if you've had?
Well, not directly, but indirectly. And I'm part of the cavalry that's the charge is being led by Weldon Angelos and Todd Harrison.
Yeah.
And next month is Second Chance Month, right? And I know that I'm going to go to Washington next month, first week in Washington with Congressman Troy Carter. He's doing his crawfish and cannabis deal. And we're going to have cannabis back on the agenda. And I think Weldon and Todd are coming up because they're good friends with the Trump kids. They're good friends with President Trump. They're good friends with Elise Johnson, who is the pardon. She's in charge of pardons with the Trump administration. And Trump is the first president to vote for state-sponsored cannabis. In his first term, he did the First Step Act. He let out a lot of cannabis, nonviolent prisoners like Weldon, and he has said that he doesn't think cannabis should be criminalized like it is. He's also said that we need safe banking in cannabis and reschedule. So the Biden administration didn't get it done. And me, I'm not on the extreme left. I'm not on the extreme right. I'm sort of down the middle. And this is a bipartisan issue because, that's how I see it. And that's how Weldon see it, because Weldon got released from prison with a lot of help from people on the right and the left. So I believe his deal where he got let out was the only time that the Koch brothers and George Soros worked together on a project to do something. So we're going to continue that, and hopefully President Trump fulfills his campaign promises.
With your position and within your advocacy, have you spoken to any members, let's say on the right, that were anti-cannabis that have started to come around on the issue?
I've done that. My first trip to Washington was probably in 2017 and 18.
Yeah. And
I was speaking with mostly people on the right, because the thing is, it's like talking to people on the left is like preaching to the choir, so you have to go where the opposition is, and just stick with the science and stick with the facts and tell them about, the medicinal benefits of this plant. Tell them, it should be regulated just like alcohol and tobacco. And the money that will come from that will succeed whatever those two sin industries that are coming in now. I believe that cannabis is going to lead the way in the 21st century of a healthier nation, a more informed nation, healthier athletes, and healthier society.
Yeah. Some of the things we hear time and time again about how this is becoming more of a political decision versus science, which keeps a lot of people flabbergasted that follow this space, because it seems like politicians are doing what politicians do and thinking about themselves and not necessarily about the people. But saying all this, Do you feel you're not so far on the left or the right? It's a bipartisan support issue right now, and you're down the middle. How would you best describe the environment with this new administration? Is this the most optimistic you have felt since advocating for this, industry for cannabis when it comes to Washington? Like maybe paint the landscape as to, is there momentum building, and more so than, what we saw from, say, the Biden administration, or is that wishful thinking?
No, it's not. I'm optimistic because I know that when this administration focuses on something, they get it done. You don't have to go through all these layers of Congress and administrative and all this, which traditionally has been done. And if this administration focuses on something, and the man at the top said he wants to be done, it's going to get done. And this doesn't have to be an act of Congress. President Trump can do it through an executive order, and Pam Bundy can do it through the DOJ because Kathleen Syllabus and HSS has already said it needs to be looked at and it needs to be rescheduled.
Yeah. You believe it will happen then?
I believe it will happen sooner than later. I am cautiously optimistic that it's going to happen sooner than later, and then this industry can take the next turn because there's a lot of blood on the streets in cannabis, as your previous guest was saying, man. Like the money is dried up, and we're kind of like even the sports leagues too. They're trying to hold him back because they always fall back on the federal prohibition at the federal level. But once that happens, Katie bar the door. This industry is going to take off.
Yeah. So say there is an announcement at rescheduling. How do you view, like both of you, I guess it's a question you could even answer too, Anthony, and we always look at the optimism that would create, but do you see this whole industry being revived in a lot of ways and really taking off to that next level once rescheduling is announced, Marvin?
Yes, I believe it's going to be a great shift in wealth. And I know I may be in the minority in cannabis, but I want big tobacco's money to come in, and I want big alcohol's money to come into cannabis because of the research and development, that is going to bring. And a lot of people in cannabis don't want that, but I do. I think the money's going to pour in from Wall Street to Main Street to different industries and different countries around the world. I believe in the United States, we've always been the leader in medicine and technology. And I think this will solidify that, man. And as we've seen at the conference, there's a lot of people, a lot of countries that are doing research and development, but the United States need to lead this deal.
I know. I think that's, the sentiment that we got was the U.S. better do something. Otherwise, they're going to be left behind, because I'm quite impressed with what they're building over in Europe. But let's not kid ourselves. If there was rescheduling, I think it would only fast track Europe and really benefit in a lot of ways, knowing that a lot of people views the U.S. being as like first mover sort of advantages in a number of industries. But did you get a chance to see that one panel with members from the International Narcotics Control Board and some of their views on cannabis? Did you see that part or no? Or were you in the auditorium?
Yeah, I was there the whole 2 days. I saw every panel, and I was very impressed with each panel, and it was very educational. And it's not if anymore. It's just a matter of when. And I know that how I feel and how people in cannabis feel, we think this administration can get it done. And I think they will get it done.
Yeah. I was
after listening to many of the speakers at the conference that I was saying last week, this week, does it give you more interest in looking at the EU as a legitimate cannabis market, especially as it relates to medical? And were there any things, I guess, that you learned from a key learning standpoint that we can take away from the European Union and implement into the U.S. Cannabis industry?
You know what they're doing in Germany is something that was of interest to me, but if they're doing a model that Leafwell is doing as far as bringing together patients, doctors, and insurance, but their research and development, is a little bit ahead of ours because of the federal prohibition. but we're quick learners over here. We're creators over here. We're innovators over here. I believe that, that we're short in the time on that. But that's the thing that interested me was what Germany was doing, because I believe they're a little ahead of everybody. Everybody thought like the Netherlands and what have you. And that's been, in Amsterdam, that's been the leader for the past few decades and whatever. But I think Germany has to pass them and what they're doing. And I definitely made contact with the Germany contingent over there.
Okay.
It's good. You won 1 or 2 Super Bowls with the Broncos?
I won 1. I spent the majority of my time with the Jets, man. But that's cool. That's cool.
Was that the back-to-back year against Atlanta or the first year against Green Bay?
It was the back-to-back year against Atlanta. It was John Elway's last game.
What a team that was.
It was a good team, man, and I felt like the football gods had blessed me because I had spent all these years with the Jets, going through some tough years, man. So the football gods blessed me at the end of my career.
I'm a Dolphins fan, so we don't get any sort of God knows what from the football gods. It's
you know what? You're a Dolphin fan, and they had it during the 70s. I grew up in Dallas in the 70s, so I was a Cowboy fan, but not now. But I'm very respectful of, like, some of the iconic teams like the Dolphins, Cowboys, Steelers, and the Giants. They've been consistent and throughout history and had some great players.
Yeah. I don't think people realize that, some of our young people, but that late 90s team, I think you guys were 14-0, and I think lost your last 2 games because you sat players. If memory serves me correct. And I think Terrell Davis, didn't he rush for over 2,000 yards that year?
He rushed for 2,007 yards. That was a magical season, and we did lose 2 out of the last 3 games. We came up here and lost our first one against the Giants. I believe it was Kent Graham was a quarterback. We lost that, and then we went down to Miami and lost to the Dolphins on Monday night. But we got it together, and then going 14-0 gives you the advantage of having home field advantage, and nobody was coming in Mile High Stadium and beating us. And we were lucky enough to win this. No, we were better than Atlanta. I can't say lucky. We were the better team, and we won the Super Bowl.
Well, I would have liked to seen you play the Vikings that year because they had an unbelievable team with
that we were scared of.
Yeah, Randall. They I don't know how they lost to Atlanta at home, but what was his name? The kicker, Gary. Oh my God,
Gary Anderson.
Right, Gary Anderson was perfect on the season, and he pulled one wide left of the NFC Championship game. And oh man, Vikings fans will never forget that one.
He had a long career, and I hope he doesn't be remembered for that, but unfortunately, he is.
Yeah. I got to ask, though, like, we see a lot of athletes, they struggle with the transition after playing careers. And, I can't imagine what it's like as an athlete to walk in front of 70,000 fans on a Sunday. That must be like an incredible feeling, but at the same time, too, a lot of anxiety. So when you see a lot of athletes that you talk to, like, how has cannabis in a lot of ways helped improve their life that maybe the average person may not understand or relate to what they're going through?
Thing is I haven't played in 25 years, and I go to different chapter meetings because the NFL has 36 NFL chapters, and I go around and I've gone around and talked to them about cannabis. And, I used to have my own brand, but I know a lot of people in cannabis. And if you're in a legal state, I can get you THC. If you're not, I can get you CBD, hemp, and whatever. And it's helped guys because I know guys that haven't played in 2 decades, 3 decades, and they're still on the opiates. They're still on the antidepressants. They're still on the painkillers and what have you. And we may not be able to cut it off, but we can cut it down. And in some instances, we can cut it off because I have a former teammate, that's still taking antidepressants because he got them post-career, his NFL career, because that stuff happens. Yeah. And we're able to, and he lives in a state where it's not a qualifying conditioning, but thanks to Leafwell, chronic pain is a qualifying condition that can go along with a depressive state. And so we're going to get him off his antidepressant medicines. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help my former teammates, my former colleagues, and society in general to get off of these opiates and benzodiazepines, because since 98, the year I won the Super Bowl, we've lost over 500,000 deaths through opiate overdose, and over a third of those were taking their drugs exactly how the doctor prescribed them, we can't do that. We're going to lose a generation. So we have to get back to plant-based medicine. We'll talk about the other plant-based medicine at a different time.
Yeah.
But let cannabis and hemp be the Trojan horse and get inside middle America. And then we can talk about everything else.
Yeah.
We celebrate, just off the topic of that, because I know Leafwell is focused on medical and medicinal marijuana. We celebrate when a market flips adult use, more access to the plant. It's obviously decriminalization comes in that fold. Do you think, though, that to an extent adult use has stifled the growth of medical marijuana and medicinal marijuana from an acceptance and a
Great
growth
question.
standpoint?
I think it's kind. I can't say stifle, but I think it's kind of muddied the water. And to me, cannabis is medicine, and nobody is getting high just to get high. In my opinion, everybody's trying to feel better, and that's what medicine does. So whether they think it's an adult use or they think it's medicinally, I believe they're trying to feel better. And it's, at the end of the day, it is medicinal. And maybe with the rescheduling, it might, the majority might fall under medical cannabis, and that way you don't have any muddy the water with, underage kids or what have you, like your former or your previous guest was talking about with Delta 9 and Delta 8. And I'm from Texas. I don't know how they're going to get that genie back in the bottle, but it's out. It's out and it's running. So why not regulate it, tax it, research it, and develop it, and like you do with tobacco and alcohol.
Yeah. That's one thing that I was impressed with a lot of the EU and the messaging. It's medical first right now, and you have a clear understanding as to why that is, and countries are getting behind it. And to your point, Anthony, has it kind of muddied the water a little bit, because I think there is some truth to that. But a clear, concise message on why rescheduling should happen is common sense right now. So you believe it will happen sooner rather than later? Like, are you thinking like some point here in 2025? And I would think from your perspective, second chance month, beginning next month in April, would be an ideal time, but that still obviously remains to be seen, right?
I just know there's going to be a big push, and I know Weldon is coming back here, and I know Todd is going to go down there, and I'm going to go down there, and we're talking with Troy Carter. The Cannabis Coalition has been put back together. Congresswoman Titus out of Nevada, she's making the push. Cory Gardner from Colorado, former senator from there. So it's a bipartisan issue, man, and I'm reinvigorated to go down and put this before Congress and see if President Trump will fulfill his campaign promises, because he's doing it all the time with his executive orders. Well, he can do it with this, and fingers are crossed with this one.
When are you going down next month?
I know my first deal is going to be the second week in April the 9th, with Troy Carter and his group, and it's going to be bipartisan. There's congressmen there. It's called Crawfish and Cannabis. And then I'm following Weldon and Todd Harrison's lead as far as when we're going to go down there and make the push to get this in front of this administration as far as banking, because the money is dried up, as far as releasing the cannabis political prisoners that are there, and rescheduling. Those are the three.
Let us know how we can help out, because I realize we can't get into the rooms we're going to have in some of those meetings. But if there's anything you want us to film once you arrive into Washington and what the message is, be more than happy to head down to Washington.
No, you got a good audience, and I'll definitely stay in contact and let you know how you can help us, or if there's something that's important or what have you that's happening. I would definitely plug you guys in, because we're all swimming in the same river, going the same way, man. So let's get this over the hump, man, and take cannabis, in the 21st century and get it going.
Well, next steps, as we're getting from some of our viewers here, let's get you and Weldon on after your trip to Washington and talk more about that. That would be incredible for our viewers just to find and learn as to what you experienced, but that would be a great thing. Sound good?
Oh, that sounds terrific, man. And even mentioning Weldon's name on the Hill, man, you see he's a superstar. Yeah. Everybody loves him. Everybody knows him. And he's just pushing ahead, man. And he's been on the Hill. He's never left. He was there with Biden, and now he's going to come back and be there with Trump and try to get something done, because it didn't happen in the last administration, which I was kind of disappointed with. But, it's going to happen.
We had him on last month, Anthony, and it was an impressive interview, to say the least. Some of the stuff that he shared with us about the Biden administration at the 11th hour when it came to pardoning and really advancing cannabis, and some of the feedback he provided us, we just shook our heads. But one thing that we did find in the big takeaway was that President Trump, yes, he is a politician, but doesn't think like the traditional politician. He's a common sense type president, as you alluded to earlier, Marvin. So hopefully those get into actions and we start to see some examples as to why he thinks that way, and we get some actual reform. Because like you said, if we do, it would just take this industry to a whole new level, and something we badly need right now.
It's going to be unseen. I don't think people are even can foresee what's going to happen with this industry. I'm a big proponent of hemp, and hemp is can disturb any market that it gets into. And as far as rescheduling and the big companies come in, I'm saying bring in the billions of dollars of research and development, and we'll see what this plan can do.
That's amazing. Marvin, always appreciate your time. It was great meeting you this week, and glad we got a chance to introduce you. A lot of our viewers have said they really like this interview. So let's get you back on next month. But in the meantime, best of luck, and let's keep in touch, okay?
Yeah, please do. Take care. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Marvin. Thanks for your time.
Appreciate your time.
Bye-bye.
Really good guy. Really good guy. And second chance month next month. So hopefully we start to see that post first 100 days and things start to mature and start to build some legs. Because as Zach said in the first interview, it's the beginning of the reckoning if we don't get some sort of reform. But do you think that's coming regardless if there is reform?
What?
Just the beginning of the reckoning as to what's going to happen.
It's already happening. Look at PharmaCann and IPR. Look at what's going on with Air Wellness. Like, just read the room. It's happening, but it's natural. Everyone's not going to make it. This is business. This is a highly regulated industry. This is an industry with a lot of uncertainty. There's going to be bodies. Like, there's no way everybody makes it.
No.
The reckoning's been happening for a while. Just look at these deals with the refis that are going on in the space. Look at the capital markets activity. Like, the valuations reflect what's going on in the industry, and that reckoning, we're probably already in the second, third, fourth inning of it. It's not coming. It's here.
Christopher Brady brought up a good point. Anthony, can you provide an update on the QP you got and had tested? What did you?
Yeah, I saw that. That's not true. It hasn't been tested yet. I need to drop it off to Brady and get it tested. I got caught up with the baby on Monday and couldn't get over to his office before we were out to DC on Tuesday. So I'm hoping to get it to him early next week and get it tested. But that's in the process.
Gretchen writes, Republican carters from Louisiana, hence crawfish and cannabis. Yes.
That's probably going to be a good event.
Can Mr. Washington come back on after his April meetings? I saw that, Mark, when I was interviewing him right at the very end there. So that question, I make sure I threw that in there. But yes, that's definitely something that we need to have on next month. But rather telling as well, when I brought up the whole high tide angle with Zach, and he was straight to the point, and be interesting to see on how that develops, because the mind can think one way or the other, but I have a feeling there could be some more things on the horizon. I don't know, don't want to speculate, but
well, so the inflection point there is going to be when he I don't want to say rescinds, but alters the 13G and files the 13D, because the 13G is indicative of passive investment. If he plans to increase his position, if he plans to, let's say, go to the route of sitting down with Raj and, let's say, retaining board seats, starting to make moves on the business, he has to go do another filing. Like he said, he's going to be a gentleman, sit down with Raj, present his case, and then move forward. The last thing you want to do is some sort of truly hostile takeover. And I think there'll be a lot of red tape and conversation that needs to happen, because those are two very large businesses in Canada from a retail perspective that would need to find integrations and synergies and how they would actually cohabitate. But the first data point for when things start to shift would be the refiling of the of what he already did, or what he already filed.
Well, I got a feeling, like I said, there's going to be more chapters written in that book, but we'll wait and see. Gretchen Gailey writes, Gary Anderson was a beast. Was he a field goal kicker, Gretchen, for the Steelers before the Vikings? I think he was. John Hamm was banned and their comments were removed. What was John doing? I thought John
saying a bunch of dumb shit.
I thought he comes on quite a bit, but anyways, John, get some sleep. Okay. We'll see you back here Monday. Hopefully you're a little bit better. Next week we got coming up some of the guests that we include. We have 2 members from the International Cannabis Control but Narcotics Control Board. Gentleman's name, God, should have this name at the top of my head, but regardless, we're going to have 2 members on. Actually, another member from Aurora Cannabis from their scientific team to talk about some interesting things that we learned this week about how certain people view cannabis, whether you're pro or against it. But I want to get a balancing act on both sides of the spectrum. So that's going to be an interview that we're going to do next week. We're also trying to get Kyle Kazan from Glasshouse on to tie down or lock down a time and day to talk about their latest earnings. And
we should have Seth back next Wednesday.
You know what? You're right. Let's reach back out to Seth Yakutin for sure. And then Bina Goldenberg from Organigram.
Yes.
Joining us.
Talk about the rebrand.
Yeah. So we will keep you posted on that. And then as usual, Mr. Michael Bronstein will be joining us on Mondays as usual for Insider's Edge. And a big fan of OPP, Naughty by Nature. 1993. We go back. What were you, 6?
6.
17.
I was 6.
I wish I was born in 87 now. Tilray earnings are coming out April 8th, 2025. Invite Simon. Okay, David, we will get on that. Thanks for the heads up. I talked to their CFO, Carl Merton, quite a bit. Any update on Canopy? Yes, we will be Irish interviewing Luke at some point next month in April. We're going to be doing a lot of work with them again, and we will look to start getting a lot more content with CGC beginning next month. So appreciate the patience, but yeah, we have reached out to them quite a bit. And that's the feedback that we got from them about 2 weeks ago. So glad to let you guys know that we will be bringing them on. So interesting story to say the least. I know there's a lot of questions, concerns in some ways, but also some just clear transparency. They want to get a better understanding with who Luke is and what the vision is for the company, both in the Canadian aspect and from the international aspect and from obviously Canopy USA. So
yeah, I think one thing that people need to start paying attention to is which of the Canadian LPs are primarily, or not primarily, but exporting to Australia. Australia's patient growth right now is exploding.
From what
they're on the verge of reaching 1 million patients.
Yeah,
in Australia.
Yeah, man, I give some of those people credit. Like they literally flew in Monday and had to attend like 2 days of a summit, flying in from Australia. Talk about jet lag.
Yeah, I'm sure they're flying first class or business class, so it's probably not too bad.
Well, regardless, if you're flying first class, which would be nice from Australia, that's a heck of a flight. But
yeah, they do it direct from Sydney to I think LA to Sydney.
They do.
It's a long ass flight.
They do. All right, everyone. In the meantime, you got any feedback or takeaways from our interview with Zach? Make sure to scan that QR code and subscribe to our Baked In newsletter. Don't forget to log on Sunday night, 4 o'clock. Actually, in the afternoon, I'll do a full recap of the biggest developments of the week in the cannabis space. We're doing some great numbers pertaining to that segment. I think a lot of you like it, so I'll have a full recap of what the biggest moments were this week in the cannabis industry. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day, sir. Gretchen and everybody out there, thank you for logging on here today. And Gretchen, thanks for coming on yesterday as well. And we'll see you back here Monday at 4 o'clock in our latest Traded Black podcast. Enjoy our weekend, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Now, that was a good one. What'd you guys all think? Did you like what we had to say here today? Do you agree, disagree with what we're saying? Love to get your feedback. As usual, leave comments below. Trade to Black is growing, and we wouldn't have done it without you. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Apple and Spotify for the audio version. And as usual, leave lots of comments. We, as I said, love to hear back from you. Thanks again, everybody, for watching.